this is BeTerrific. You are the Terrifics. You make BeTerrific special. Thank you so much for watching at BeTerrific TV on all social media. We've got a very special presentation now. My good friend Meric is joining us from D3, Digital Dynamic Displays. This is one of their displays. We've been using it all week, and it is tremendous. 1.6 millimeter, I believe?
1.6 millimeter, yes.
It is so clear. Even right here, you cannot tell that there are pixels. That's how clear it is. I love that you can show really sharp images, but you can show shallow depth of field. You can really see that, and it looks great up close. It also looks great 100 feet, 100 yards away. It's great for sunlight or indoor applications like this. Tremendous. That's what you guys do. You specialize in the impossible. You specialize in doing great screens, but it's really a lot in the processing power and also in the intelligence of what you do. You really take a lot of time and care to plan everything out to make sure it's right for your client. And I can't thank you enough for being here and being part of the content creation pavilion, the BeTerrific content creation pavilion here at InfoComm, and supporting it and seeing the vision and doing this. And this is just tremendous. So this display you've seen all week is the display that we've been using, and it is a D3 screen.
Thank you very much. The display is very impressive, but thank you very much for the forum. And wanted to talk a little bit about what our displays do, but more what we do as a company when customers come to us with a challenge. Right? And typically, in the old days, it always was to be a 16 by 9 box. It was a 4 by 3 box. But these days, it's beyond the box. Right? Everybody wants to have shapes. Everyone wants to have curves. And we're just going to start talking a little bit about the challenges that brings to the table, as well as the opportunities to really create some interesting landmarks. So,
and I want to point out that you can see how beautiful the display looks on the screen. I've asked our crew, so you'll see a little cables at the bottom, but I asked them to keep it as a super wide shot. For most of it, we'll see close-ups, but I want it to be a super wide shot so people can see the display and all its beauty. And of course, we've had a great backdrop all week, putting all sorts of different things on. You do about 80% of the displays in Times Square. You're all over the world. You're here in Vegas, Dubai, everywhere, and some of the largest corporations and retailers. A lot of the signs and screens you see are D3. So I just wanted to throw that out there. This will be a little bit of a conversation and a PowerPoint presentation, which will be nice, and then we'll add your two partners on to have more of a conversation.
That's what we wonderful. That's what we want.
Interview, yes. So
yeah, pretty much we're on our 10th year this year.
Congratulations.
So, thank you very much. And the landscape has changed quite a bit. I mean, I've been in Times Square since 1999, and actually the display you see right behind me was my first display, and that one is very dear to my heart. This year, actually, right now, we're busy upgrading it for the 3rd time. So the technology has changed tremendously, and this one was one of those displays that really took advantage of shapes very ahead of its time.
It's my favorite screen that I know of that you've done. It's my favorite screen in general because I know the challenges that went into it. I know how complex it is, and I know how ahead of the curve it was. Back then, nobody thought of doing anything like this, ever. You'd never seen a screen like that, and I grew up around screens, in the business, seeing every screen you could imagine. I saw the first plasma, I watched the Knicks game on it, it was 24 inches, and I went, whoop-dee, I've got a 40-inch screen right here, and I'm watching the Knicks NBA Finals 1994 on a plasma this big.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
This display actually was a compromise. The original design called for a complete 3-dimensional wave curtain, and when they saw the price tag of how long it would be to do that, they said, and this was an alternate idea that was presented. They said, this is perfect, we'll go with the ribbon.
And I'm sure this wasn't cheap either.
No, this wasn't cheap either, but...
iconic, though.
Very iconic, and it's almost like Social Security, the 3rd rail. Nobody wants to touch the shape. All of these years, every time there's a discussion, shall we change the shapes? And they go like, nope, we can't change the shapes. Everybody realizes it and knows it. This year's upgrade is going to make it a little bit larger. The center screen is growing a little bit to get more square footage. But the key thing is we're increasing the resolution. And every time we went and did an upgrade, we went from a tighter resolution to from a bigger resolution to a tighter. The original one was, believe it or not, a 50 millimeter.
Wow.
When we replaced that in 2006, it went to a 10 millimeter RGB single diode. And now we're upgrading it to a 10 millimeter SMD complete package. But the challenges that go into building these displays, we'll touch upon it a little bit later on another slide, but this one was probably the one that had the biggest challenge. It got thrown to us early in, and this is actually the sign that got me into the business of signage because of those challenges. So it's a topic dear to my heart.
And this, if just in case anybody doesn't recognize it, it is the ABC sign in Times Square that wraps around the GMA studios.
That's correct. Every day it's on the air every morning, 7 to 9, and it's definitely iconic. Shapes have changed a lot over Times Square, but people always look at this as the towering studio on Times Square. It's very unique and very dear to our heart. So again, as we said, 16 by 9, it was very much yesteryear. 2006, everybody said, we need to go 16 by 9. When you're in Times Square, you put the 16 by 9 screen up there, everybody goes like, okay, boring. Now what do we do to make it interesting? But it is, today really the whole idea is to create this attracting eyeballs and to be able to create this with mixed media, not only a display, but combining many different elements there. So whether it, LED displays, they can get very high resolution up for tight shots, but then you can do stuff with less resolution to be able to cover a larger expanse and to do it less expensively. And finally, you can use other technologies to be able to augment it. And we do that with our own architectural product line, as well as using technologies to incorporate in us. For example, this is the Stephen Colbert Show studio. And
if they take the tight shot on you, it looks like you're in the studio. That's how clear the display is. Take the tight shot real quick. It really looks like you're in the studio.
It certainly does. That display, one of the displays there is also 1.6 millimeter, and you can actually see part of it there as well. But this display incorporates 1.6, 2.5, as well as projection mapping. So, and the projection mapping was really unique because it's a 4-dimensional projection mapping on the surface of the features of the theater, by using 3 projectors and actually blending that in there.
And that's on the ceiling, right?
On the ceiling, up the top there.
Yeah, it looks like a cathedral.
It does look like a cathedral, but incorporating all of these 3 elements, really it makes more of a digital experience than just creating one screen. So a lot in our business is to create unique experiences that attract eyeballs. That's really what we are in the business for, not just putting a display up there, not just coming with the highest resolution, but the experience to capture eyeballs.
There has to be a wow factor.
There has to be a wow factor.
And you have to stop and go, hey, I'm paying attention, because that's the whole point, especially with advertising, when the signs are for advertising. If the advertising doesn't capture somebody's attention, doesn't get them to stop, and it's easy to happen in a place like Times Square or Las Vegas that they all blend together. If you don't jump out at something,
it's noise.
You don't grab somebody, it's lost.
It's noise. It's noise. And to come out from the noise, you have to create a spectacular, and the spectacular gets done in many different ways. So let's talk about some of those ways in the next slide. So don't box yourself into one size. This is a perfect example. This was the Disney store, and when they were in the Times Square, the nice thing with Times Square is everybody who comes in there is a captive audience to us, because by the laws of New York City, you have a certain amount of square footage of your frontage has to be LED displays. So if any retailer comes in there, they need to put a sign in there. And typically, they don't want to put a boring sign in there. They want to do something interesting. And Disney, being Disney, they came in there and said, we're Disney. We want to make sure it's the most interesting, unique display that you can put in there. So we worked with their designers to bounce ideas back and forth. And at the end, ended up with what you see here. And there are 3 elements, as you see over my shoulder and back there. You have the big display, which is a 10 millimeter SMD display. And that's the main area where you're capturing the audience. The Disney channel letters are beyond, just underneath there, but they are also mapped to the same content template. So it allows you to interact from just a traditional channel letter into the content in very unique ways. Then finally, on the bottom part, you have the individual boxes. Those are actually indoor. And at the time, you couldn't do so 6 millimeters.
Those are, they kind of look like windows.
The little windows on the corner there. And when we were doing this, 6 millimeter, really you couldn't do it outdoor. So we did these inside, beyond the glass, but again, it worked. Close up, you have a 6 millimeter display just beyond the glass, To do this for an outdoor-facing wall had its own challenges, so we had to make this daylight brightness. So we have some daylight brightness 6mm product that blends very well with all the other ones. Because again, when you have one display that has to be at least 5,000–6,000 nits brightness to be able to compete with the sunlight, you have to make sure that all your other elements are the same brightness, because you can't have one piece brighter, the other piece dimmer. So we have high brightness 6mm as well as 4mm products that can go close to the wall to be able to work well with a blended environment like that. But the display elements here, all of those pieces you see are all on one template. And what that allows you to do is choreograph everything that happens in every piece of these things frame by frame. And that's really very important. And the other thing that's important to the content creator is to make it easy for him to create these large templates. Yes, you could always do separate contents, render it separately, and combine them on multiple players, but that just it doesn't flow with the creative process.
It's hard to sync. It's hard. It doesn't flow with the creative process, and it also limits your creativity
Completely. When you give an artist a template saying, here's your template, and we do this for every display that we sell. We give them a template saying, here's your template, and here are all the different boxes, and if you want to choreograph between here and here, we even will make them the same size, even though the LEDs are different sizes. So what we'll do in the template, we'll show them exactly the same size, so he can creatively move content back and forth. You couldn't just do that, because if you did that, you would move into an area that is, the pixels are farther apart. And remember, in the LED business, everything is a pixel. Every piece of data that you have in there is a pixel. And that pixel can be really close by, it could be really far apart. And when you take a pixel that's really close by in the content template and you move it onto a big display, it gets larger. So now you have two elements here. You have a 6, you have a 10. If you didn't do any processing, it would just suddenly get larger, and you don't want to do that. You want to give the creative person the tools to be able to use these as one complete template, and we do that as our specialty. So the next display that we want to talk about here is using, content is king, as we all know, we talked about yesterday. But in order to create the newer way of getting user engagement, you really want to use user-generated content. People love to see themselves, people love to have their own stuff up there, so that is a key part of how we interact with the users to capture eyeballs.
But it's very hard to achieve.
Very hard to achieve.
Especially because people are shooting it on their iPhones, on their Android devices, on whatever, and they're not professionals.
They're not professionals, and there's a whole bunch of challenges with that. You have to approve it. So a lot of things go into when you start doing user-generated content. One of the key things, in the old days, we always used to say, let's put a camera up here, but then, oh my God, do we have to go and moderate that camera? Because how about if somebody goes in front of it and does an obscene gesture? Now, how are we going to do that? And the first display in Times Square where that became not an issue was the Forever 21 display, where the owner said, I really don't care. The display is there. If people want to shame themselves, that's fine. So we had a camera that literally pointing to the crowd for 10 minutes, 50 minutes at a time, and people behaved.
And well, I was going to say, the funny thing is, you're up on a screen in Times Square, right? So it's very public.
Yep.
It's not private anymore. If you do something that's obscene, everybody knows that you did the obscene thing. You're that person.
Absolutely. You're looking at yourself live in there, where all the crowd is there, so you can't, your own camera, right? There's not a lot that you can do. But that kind of broke the traditional barrier of, does it have to be moderated? Still, a lot of our advertisers want to make sure that the displays are moderated. They're very concerned about their brand, so we put a two-step thing in there, where in their photographs presented or so, it goes through an approval process, and somebody looks at it, they say, oh, I like that, and then it goes into content, and it goes up there. But if you can create user-generated content, it really keeps the loop fresh, and it keeps the content creation process inexpensive.
Well, and you're engaging the audience.
Completely.
And that's the biggest key from the get-go, and you're doing it that way. And so it's great. The biggest problem and challenge with creating any of these signs or screens is that you have to create content and refresh it regularly and create it regularly. It becomes expensive.
Yep.
Here's a very inexpensive way of doing it.
Very much so. Now, as far as what works with, and New Yorkers are a perfect crowd to test this on. With, are they going to actually engage or not engage? And in Times Square, you literally can, try to hunt somebody down, and they'll just like walk through there and have this look, kind of like, don't bother with me. I'm just going to go through. And it's very interesting how to capture them, because we did a lot of experiments on people of how to get them engaged in displays. One thing is a surefire way that always works is to be able to do get them on the screen. Right? They love their own faces.
Absolutely.
They love to be able to see themselves. That works great. Another thing that really works is give them freebies. If you get freebies, it's amazing how many people apply for that.
It's funny you say that. We've been giving Kindles. We're giving Kindles away to the audience who shows up here and sits in the crowd and goes into our control room. It's part of the education process here. And I just looked at the list. We've got 10 pages of people signed up for 3 Kindles. I'm like, wow.
Yeah. There was a good use case where we did was Walgreens a while back, and there was a photography. You know, they would come there, we want your photograph up there. It was okay. People were engaged in it. Then one day they said, you know, we're going to give away free lipstick in Walgreens. You can buy it, and every server that we had crashed because there were so many people waiting in line to get their faces up there. The face is one thing, but the freebie really works great.
Yeah, absolutely. If it's free, it's for me.
It's for me.
Yes, that is the key.
New Yorkers. The other thing that you want to be able to do with creating displays that are out of the box is to use this shape, but use it smartly. Just because you have a big surface, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to plaster it all there.
Right, I think this is so smart because, and this is a great point, if you look at this screen behind you right now, this is a demonstration of a screen that, to me, would be boring if it was just a screen. Yeah, okay, we get it. But because you've broken it up and done something creative with it, it's very, very interesting. And you can make it art and you can do all sorts of stuff. And it's fun to look at.
Yep, certainly is.
You know, maybe I'm a little jaded because I've seen screens all my life, but we all have seen screens all our lives at this point. So I think any time that you can do anything different, it really changes the game.
Yeah, this is the Gucci store in Beverly Hills. Again, very high end retailer. These are 4mm SMD displays, but by using the mirrors in between, the spacing, the separation, it really works great, and it suddenly becomes a non-traditional display that really captures the eyeballs. Again, these have challenges, right, because there's spacing in between there. You have to figure out how to work with those spacings, but it really works great.
It's beautiful. It really looks awesome.
The next topic that happens when you start doing these many different surfaces and different shapes and objects and how to synchronize them and how to optimize them, that really becomes quite challenging. Again, you can always tell people create separate content for each one of them. No creative guy wants to do that, right? They all want to work together. So we have 2 ways to do it. One is the really easy way of doing it, where we combine all of these pieces of content in one large template, and then we can go and map each one of them separately. And the other one is by using the processor's power, especially if you're going to choreograph from one to the other, especially if you have to use the multiple screens to be able to tell a continuous story. For example, if a ball is traveling from one display and is going over to the next display, the last pixel here is not the first pixel there. That's the easy way of doing it. What you need to do is you need to calculate exactly the distance between those displays, figure out how many pixels it's going to be to have virtual pixels in between there, so when it disappears and shows up, your eye goes like, oh, okay, it makes a bigger picture view. It's
actually brilliant, and it's the right way to do it. However, and I totally get what you're saying, it's making my brain hurt thinking about executing.
Execution is really hard, and that's part of the reason why we do these templates. Yeah. So in the template, the boxes are exactly where they are. We don't tell people you have to put virtual pixels in there. We'll say, look, this is where one display is, this is where the other display is. Guess why there is a big black space in between there? That's where the display is not seen, but it is traveling. So make sure when you make your content, it travels across that black space. When it shows up here, it will ballistically be correct.
It's pretty awesome.
Yep. So this is one of the more complicated templates that we have created, and this was for a display where the uniqueness that they wanted to do, and this replaced 6 regular DVD players. This is what they used to have, right?
DVD players.
6 DVD players, 6 screens exactly the same size, 16 by 9, boring, right? So the next incarnation of this was still the 6 screens, still 16 by 9, but augmented with a whole bunch of different screen elements all over the place. So you have them on the bottom, you have 6mm, you have 10mm on the top, you have 20mm pieces on the side, you have diffusion going on there, so there's color pieces going on there. On the corners, they're 10mm, all over the 120 different surfaces.
Wow. And is this the Quicksilver screen?
This is the Quicksilver screen in Times Square. Unfortunately, they went bankrupt, so the screen right now is dark. That's one of the challenges.
Somebody else might inherit a really nice screen.
But the the template for this was really complicated, and, but it made it simple. If you told people you got 120 different screens and all different resolutions, and here are the different sizes, they would have just gone crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't. The template. That's the way. The template.
Yep. When you start going into some curved objects, you really start getting into challenging territory, and that's when mapping becomes a major topic. So on these displays here, you got the Aeropostale display, which goes both in and outside of the store. That's very unique. You got the Quicksilver one we talked about. But let's talk a little bit about the ABC sign, because that one is probably the most unique one as far as challenges that it had faced in execution. When they originally came up with that idea, the screen actually had a big ABC metal meatball logo made out of metal right at that curved area, and that's where the ABC brand was represented. When they showed it to one of the higher execs, he looked at it and he was like, that's crazy, you got a sign behind it, why are you putting that big thing covering the sign? Being a high-level executive, everybody said, sure, let's get rid of it. So they got rid of the big thing. And I got the phone call the next day after they did their first content test, and that's how I got pulled into digital signage, actually. And what they had done is they tried to project their ABC meatball logo onto these ribbons, but not realizing that each of these ribbons was on a separate three-dimensional space, a different curvature, and therefore a different length. Their beloved meatball became a shredded meatball, and pieces were all over the place. And they just went, oh my God, what are we going to do? Well, let's call the engineers to figure out how to solve this problem. So I got involved and probably spent my next 2 years of my life trying to come up with a solution to this problem. And that is the one that propelled me into digital signage. But at that time, to be able to do the processing necessary for this, we put a large refrigerator-sized SGI workstation that took every frame as it passed through the system and morphed every frame to take into account where it was at one point, so we would travel at different speeds on the different ribbons. So when you stood right in front of the display, everything looked perfect, because everything would morph, would squeeze, and would come out and would travel. So almost think about it like you have a flashlight in your hand, and you're pointing it on this ribbon, and what would it look like? It would look perfect, right? But it's no longer a perfect circle. It's this elliptical thing. It fills out all the pieces, and that's the process that we did in software. It was every frame of video that went up there.
That's a tremendous process. So you were at ABC working in the graphics department for many years, running the graphics department. Yes. And we're not talking ABC local, ABC network.
ABC television network, yes.
Yeah.
All right, going on to our next interesting display here. Here's Uniglow, and Uniglow, there's elevators go up and down. Where is that? Over there. They're the elevators. They wanted to have displays in the elevators, so we put displays in the elevators.
That's got to be a huge challenge.
It was fun. The biggest challenge was to be able to get a cable that would live through the flexing back and forth that the elevator would go all the time for. There had to be some special cables. Power, of course, was very unique and interesting. But again, using multiple elements. You have the elevators, you have the windows, you have ticker tunnels, and all together it really works, combined, making a digital experience.
It looks great.
Next one here is 3 locations for Victoria's Secret. Again, Victoria's Secret is very much in the business of using LCD panels for video walls. But when you want to go outside of the traditional box, LED is really the only thing you can do, and architects just love that. Designers love that. They just go around, they figure out all of the different nooks and crannies that they can fill content in, and they definitely take great advantage of these spaces. So very unique. This is Herald Square on the top. You got the Atlantic Terminal on the left there, and you have the Vancouver in BC on the bottom. All unique displays. 2.5 millimeter, 6 millimeter, and 4 millimeter.
Wow. All very nice.
Thank you. And that is kind of the main things that I wanted to touch up on. Wrapping up, creating multi-surface digital displays is way to go. The uniqueness of capturing eyeballs, being able to do things in a different way is absolutely the way to go. Getting customer content that is engaging, and working with all these different surfaces, you really get the best way to create an eyeball attractor and to capture eyeballs. So that's what we are in the business for, not just signage, but capturing eyeballs.
Well, it's phenomenal. I have a ton of questions, but I think I'm going to save it for when we're going to take a quick break, and then I'm going to save it for when George and Jason join us, your two partners, and I can't wait to talk to them. So we're going to take a quick break, have George and Jason join us, and we'll have more. I turned to the wrong camera. We'll have more, a whole lot more, right after this. Stay with us. Your live continuing coverage of InfoComm 2016, right after this.